Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to share with you some information about another online class that the Stamps of Life will be having in November. I'm not quite sure at the time of filming what the actual date is of the online class, but I want to show you what it entails. And when the Stamps of Life has an online class, when you purchase the class kit, you do get a link with the live class information. So on the day of the event, you will be able to click on that link and access the live class, and you'll be making cards with Stephanie Barnard, the owner and designer at the Stamps of Life. So the class kit entails the fun goodies that you see here. It is called the Moose Mountain Online Class, and it comes with this adorable stamp set. And it is the Moose Mountain stamp set. It has this stamp of the 3 mountains here. It also has a moose, a fire, a log, a squirrel, and there are some sentiments. It moose be your birthday, enjoy the adventure, hi friend, and hey there. That is so adorable. And I could see this stamp set being used for not only just fun scene cards, but you can make a lot of masculine cards with this set. It also has the matching dies, and the dies including the shadows. It also has a fold it, and those of you that have been with the Stamps of Life for a long time, you know that these fold it dies make these shaped cards. So this would make a mountain shaped card, and you can use this as an A2 size card base, or you can use it to put on the front of a card. And it also has the falling leaf stencil. I made 3 cards and I want to share these with you. I think these turned out so super cute. So this first one is with the mountain fold it. So you can see that this card is shaped like a mountain, and that's my A2 size card base, and then I colored up these little guys. Now this little marshmallow, that is from the Hot Chocolate to Stamp set, and I just included that there like he's roasting marshmallows, and I think that turned out so stinking cute. I also made a shadow box, and the shadow box, it has the mountains in the background. You can see that there. It is the same mountain die that I used for this A2 size card. So it's the actual folded die that I was able to die cut and put there on the background. And that little star background that you see there, that is from the Slimline card die set, and I just cut that down. And then I used my Arteza colored pencils, and I colored up all these images. This card, I used my Copic markers. I just wanted to go for a different look, and here I wanted to use my colored pencils, and I think that turned out super cute. And remember, your shadow boxes, they do fold flat for mailing. And then this next one I'm so in love with. This is the Z-Fold card base from the Stamps of Life, and check this out. Ah, isn't that adorable? All of those little critters and this adorable winter scene. So you can see here that I used the moose, the fire, the squirrel with the log, so those come with the Moose Mountain set, but I wanted to bring in some other fun stamps, and these are other fun stamps from the Stamps of Life. So I have the penguins, the wattle penguins to stamp, and I also use the penguins to stamp. I also use the snow globe to stamp set that just came out for the Christmas tree. These little hats were from the penguin set. You can see my mountains in the background. These mountains were the smaller mountains. So those are the dies from the smaller mountains that came with that stamp set. And then when you turn it to the other side, there's another cute little scene. So we have the more cute little penguins. We have the snowman and the reindeer, again from the snow globe set. A couple more Christmas trees. We have the word joy here. And I also have the warm wishes. This is from the Christmas sentiments that the Stamps of Life has on HSN. So I wanted to include that there. Now here I kind of left a little bit of empty space, and you see I didn't include the snow border like I did on the other panels, because I wanted this to be a space where you can write your message. And I think that turned out super cute. So the message would be written here, and you see the fun little scene, and that's a Z-Fold card, and that can stand up on a table just like that. So if you are interested in seeing how I made all of these cards, So from the shadow box to the fold it to the Z-fold card, stay tuned because I do have a tutorial for all of these cards coming up. Now, I do want to add that these cards that you see here, these are my own creations. So whatever the cards are that you're going to be making with the online class, I do not know. So that is something that will be held as surprise and only Stephanie knows, and that we will not find out until the day of the online class. So down in the description box, I will put a link to the online class information so you can hop on over there and you can see more details, including the day and time of the online class. And if you're not available on the day and time of the class, it will be recorded so you can go back and watch it later. I will also link in the description box all of the extra supplies that I use to create my fun cards, so in case you're interested in seeing those products. So go ahead and stay tuned if you want to see how I made these 3 fun cards. I'm going to start out by showing you the coloring of my stamps, and this is going to be for the shadow box card where I'm using my colored pencils, and I am bringing in my Arteza colored pencils. And for the body of this moose, I have the burnt umber, which is my dark color, and I'm just outlining his body as you see here. And then I'm going to come in with my mid-tone, which is my hazelnut brown, and just go around where I colored the dark and just extend that a little bit further with the mid-tone. I'm going to then come in with my raw umber and do the same thing, just extending that a little bit further in towards the middle of the body. I'm not going to color fully into the white because I am going to be using my Gamsol and my blending stump to blend that out, and that will give me a nice shade there. So you can see the shadow there on the edges and then the lighter color on the inside. So again, just taking my blending stump, dipping it into the Gamsol solution, and then just blending out those colors. And I just love the effect that the Gamsol has when you are blending your colored pencils. For the antlers, I'm using the hazelnut brown as my darkest shade and just outlining the very bottom of the antlers. Then I'm going to come in with the raw umber and go right over top of that, as well as the jasmine yellow, and finish that out. And then I'm going to take my blending stump with the Gamsol and just blend those colors. And I'm looking here and I see that there's some harsh lines, so I am going to come in and I'm going to just add some more color and some more Gamsol just to smooth that out. So here you see me coming back in with that jasmine yellow and just blending it out some more with the Gamsol. I do take that hazelnut brown for the bottoms of the feet, then decide to come in with a little bit darker yellow. It's the Tumeric yellow, and just see if I can get a better blend with those colors that I have chosen. And then again, adding the Gamsol to smooth all of that out. So here with the fireplace, I am using the rose red on the outside and the blood orange, and that's on the outside edges of the fire, and then I'm going to blend that together. And then on the inside, I will be using the Tuscan sun for the outside, and then the inside is the sunflower yellow, and then I will come in with the Gamsol and just blend those out. Now I do want to mention that I did stamp these images onto the powdered sugar cardstock from the Stamps of Life using the chocolate ink, and that seemed to work very well with the colored pencils. For the rocks, I'm going to be using the charcoal gray and the shadow gray colors there. So you can see I put the darker color there on the top, the lighter color all around, and then just blended that out with the Gamsol. And then I'm going to come in and color those logs that are directly on top of those rocks. The colors that I'm going to use for the logs are the raw umber and the hazelnut brown. And then I'm going to come in with my Gamsol and I'm going to blend that out. For the log, I'm using the raw umber and the hazelnut brown, just adding some shadows in there and then filling the rest of that in, and then I will use my Gamsol to blend that pigment out. Now I did do a video on these Arteza colored pencils, so if you haven't seen that, I will link that below and you can take a look at that, and that video will provide you with a more detailed review of these pencils and show you some more coloring with them in case you're interested. And then I take this cute little squirrel And I add the ginger colored pencil to where I want to put some shadows. I am also going to come in with the camel brown, and I'm just using those two colors on this entire squirrel. And then I will come in with the gamsol. I do end up using the hazelnut brown on the feet, so I do bring in the third color, but just for the feet. But for the body, it's just the ginger and the camel brown. And I do want to add that when you use the actual top layering die for the squirrel, if you wanted to cut him out, let's say a pattern paper, it will cut his arms so that they're open. So if they wanted to hold something, you have that option because you can actually put like a little stick in his hand. I actually have a card where I put a stick in his hand and put a marshmallow at the end of the stick, but I don't use the dies to do that. I just kind of just put the stick there because I do color all my images up. But if you wanted to use the dies, I'm just giving you that option that you can do that. I am bringing in the Christmas tree stamp from the Snow Globe to Stamp set, and I did ink that up with the green apple ink from the Stamps of Life and stamped it onto the powdered sugar cardstock. The colors that I'm using are the Matcha green and the Absinthe green, and for the bark of that tree I use the hazelnut brown. And I die cut all my images. You can see there I have 8 Christmas trees in total. I am using the Shadow Box 5x7 die set from the Stamps of Life, and I took that largest die in the set and die cut 2 pieces of the blueberry cardstock. Next I took the large square die that came in that die set and I put it over top of one of those blueberry die cut pieces. I am going to add a piece of washi tape to that cardstock to hold it in place. Ran that through my die cut machine, and that just cuts the window out of the front of your die cut. Next, I'm just folding along the score lines of both of those die cut pieces. And you can kind of see here how I'm going to start assembling this. I do put some glue on one of the panels there and then put it on the back panel. So I'm actually putting glue on the flap of the panel that has the window in it, attaching that to the flat back panel that's has the solid cardstock back, and just pressing that down. Now if you wanted to, you can go ahead and put glue on the other flap and go ahead and make your shadow box complete, but I'm going to wait and I'm actually going to leave that open because I want to get my mountain assembled, because this is going to go in the background of that shadow box. So here I'm using the mountain fold it die set, and I die cut the shadow layer with the storm cardstock, the layering piece with the cloud cardstock, and then the top of those mountain pieces with the powdered sugar cardstock. And I am adding some cloud ink to the edges of the cloud cardstock just for some added dimension. And I do that for all 3 sections of the mountain. That ink is only going on the cloud cardstock. It will not be going on the snow tops. Next, I just want to make sure that I have those die cut pieces in the right order so that I glue them down correctly on my shadow layer. And I just apply glue to the backs, add those to that shadow layer, and I will also add glue to the mountain tops, that white cardstock, and add those to the top. This mountain is going to be glued onto the back of my shadow box. And before I add that, I am going to be using the Slimline card die set from the Stamps of Life. Although I'm not making a slimline card, I am using the background die that's included in that set. So here I took a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock and I just cut it so that it's a little bit larger than that large rectangle die that came with the slimline die set. And I'm just adding some ink to it because I wanted to add some ink and make a kind of like a little nighttime scene. So I'm taking that star background die that came with the slimline card die set and I'm layering it on top of this cardstock just by adding some washi tape to keep this down. So I have the background die inside of the large rectangle die, and I'm going to run that through my die cut machine. I'm also going to take that large rectangle die and die cut a piece of powdered sugar cardstock, and then I'm going to add glue to the back of the background layer and add that directly to the top of that powdered sugar cardstock. And these pieces will lay completely even. They'll be the same size, so there shouldn't be any paper extending beyond the edges. And then I'm going to take that same square die that came with the shadow box die set. It's the same square that I used to cut the window out of the shadow box, and I'm just adding some washi tape there and die cutting that piece of background dye, and that will make sure that it fits to size inside of my shadow box. I did not need that background dye to cover the entire length of the shadow box. You can see there that it only fills about half of it because I'm going to have the mountains covering the bottom part of that shadow box. So you really won't be able to see that it's only partial, it's a partial piece. So I add glue, add it to my shadow box, and then I'm going to add those mountains there. So this is why it was so much easier not to close the shadow box fully, because I am able to have more room here to add these layers in the back. I did have to snip off a little bit of the edge on each side of the mountains so that this mountain will fit inside the shadow box, but that was really no big deal. It was only a little bit. And then I'm just going to add some glue to the back of the mountains and add them directly to the shadow box. Notice I am putting them a little bit further up, not completely towards the bottom, because I want to make sure that plenty of those mountains will be seen through the window in the shadow box. And that gap there at the bottom, it will be covered with the hillside borders that will eventually be going in the shadow box. So now I'm ready to close up my shadow box, so I just add glue to the top panel there and adhere it to the front window of the shadow box. Next, I took that little hillside die that came with the shadow box set, and I die cut 2 pieces of the green apple cardstock, and I just added some ink to the edges of those. It's the green apple ink from the Stamps of Life, just for some added dimension. And then I just took my blending tool and just added some ink to the top of the cardstock just to add some more dimension to the front. Next, I'm going to take the Christmas tree die cuts, and I'm just placing them along the edge of one of those borders. And once I have them the way that I want them, I'm just going to add some glue to the bottom part of each one of those Christmas trees. And I am using my Tombow glue because I do find that when I use the Tombow glue, it gives me a little bit more wiggle room than the art glitter glue. And that way, if I need to reposition the tree, because you can see how I have them kind of in a diagonal there, it's kind of like a slope. And if I needed to fix the position of how I have them adhered, I can easily remove that tree and reposition it without having it stick. The art glitter glue, I think, just sticks really quickly. It's a very strong glue. They're both strong glues, but the art glitter glue just sticks much quicker than the Tombow. So I take that entire panel and I add glue to the flaps on each side, and I add that to the inside of my shadow box. And then I take the second panel and I add glue and add that in front of that tree panel. And I wanted to put the trees on the panel outside of the shadow box. It was just easier because there were so many to add, and I wanted to get it exactly right, so that's why I did that outside of the box. And then this panel here, it only has a few images on it, so I went ahead and added it to the box, and now I'm just positioning those images where I want them to appear, and then I could just glue them directly in. And another reason why I wanted to add those images with the border in place inside of the box is because those images are really the main focal point. So I wanted to make sure that when I adhere them to that little grassy hill panel, that they can be fully seen inside that window. I didn't want to adhere them too close to the edge of the shadow box, so by adding it after that grassy panel is already in place in the shadow box, it allows me to actually see how much room I have there within that window frame, if that makes sense. So I am going to add a couple of these Christmas trees. I had 2 left over, so I'm going to add them there in the front, and then I'm going to add the moose, the fireplace, and the squirrel to the front panel of that hillside border. Keep in mind that when you are adding glue to these images, do not put glue over the entire back side, because part of those image is going to be not adhered to any cardstock at all. So you really only need glue to the bottom. So I did put glue on the fireplace and on the squirrel with the log, but I'm adding some foam, dimensional foam, to the back of the moose and adding him there in front of the trees. I just wanted to make it look like he's in front of the trees and not just flat on top of the trees. For the sentiment, I cut a piece of the powdered sugar cardstock with a stitched rectangle die, stamped out in blueberry ink the sentiment, and added it there to the top right of my shadow box, and that completes my shadow box card. And remember that this does fold flat for mailing. You can put that in an envelope. For my next card, I'm going to be using the Mountain Fold It die set, and I'm going to be making the Fold It card. But first I want to show you the coloring because I am using a different medium to color my stamped images. I will be using my Copic markers. I stamped my images out with the Spectrum Noir alcohol proof ink in the brown color, and I stamped it onto the Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth cardstock, which is what I use for alcohol coloring. And the colors I'm using for the mousse are the E39, which is my darkest, E37, E33, E31, so those are the browns, and I'm coloring it the same way that I did when I used my colored pencils. So same process, the dark color goes on the edges, then I follow in with the next shade. So the dark shade was the E39, then the next shade E37, I go a little bit over top of that and extend a little bit out towards the middle, and then over top of that with the E33, and over top of that one with the E31. So each time I'm just going over and extending more in towards the middle to create this nice blend. And for the head and the mouth area, same thing. So starting out with the dark E39, outlining the edges there, coming in with the E37, coming in with the E33 and extending that a little bit more in towards the center. And then the E31 just on top of that one and extending it more towards the center to blend that out. I'm using the E39 and the E33 for the ears. I am using the E39, the darkest color, for the feet. So here with the antlers, I am laying down the E53 along the bottom of the antlers, coming in with the E50 just a little bit over top of that previous color and extending a little bit outward, and just outlining the E53. I'm trying to make this a little bit darker, so every time you go over the same color with another layer, you always end up with a darker color. So you'll see that I kind of went over it again and then went in with the E33, which was even a darker shade because I wasn't getting the dark enough shade that I wanted with that E53 color. So I brought in the E33 just to make it a little bit darker. So moving on to the squirrel, I do take my E33 marker and just outline where I think the shadow is going to be, and then take the E31 and then just blend that out. And now I'm using the tip to tip method, and I'm just taking my lighter color, my E31, putting it on the tip of the darker color, which is the E33, and seeing if I can get even a better blend. And then I'm just outlining the squirrel's tail in my darker shade, the E33, and then coming in with all the other squares there and coloring in with the E31. The fur on that squirrel consists of just those two colors, the E31 and the E33, and I do take my E37 and color up the feet. Moving on to the log, I am using the E49 as my darkest color, and I'm just adding some of that dark color where I see some of those lines in that log, and also coming in on some of the edges and adding some of that dark color there as well. Then I'm going to come in with my E47. So this pen, it does not have a cap on it that has the number, but it is my E47, and I'm just extending some of that dark color out using that medium shade, and then I come in with my E44 and do the same thing. Eventually we'll fill in all the spaces with my E43, so that light color there is the E43. I know the cap is off the screen there. And then I just come in and just go through those markers again. So just reapply a lot of those same colors just to add a little bit more contrast and darken up that image. Next, moving on to the fire, I took the E44 and put it on the edges of those logs. Then I'm taking the E47 and coloring up the top of those logs, and then I'm ready to color the fire itself with the YR18, coming in with the YR16, and then finally the Y17. Now the fire that I'm coloring here is a little bit different than the way I colored it with the colored pencils. I took a different approach with the colored pencils. I did the whole outside border in the red and orange, and then the inside just in yellow, but here treated it as one entire image rather than in sections like I did with the colored pencils, and I kind of like this way a little bit better. So the rocks were colored with the E7 and E9, and now I'm ready to start assembling the card. So I took the shadow layer of the mountain die, the large folded die cut that out of the chocolate cardstock, as well as those layering pieces. So I'm doing brown on brown. This is the chocolate cardstock from the Stamps of Life. And I'm just adhering those layering pieces directly onto the shadow layer. And I also took that same die, the top layering piece, and I die cut the snowy mountain tops out of the powdered sugar cardstock. And here you see me just gluing those on. This card is going to be my actual card shaped like a mountain, and this is going to be the piece that layers onto the card base. And we will work on the card base a little bit later. Right now I just wanted to get this top part decorated. So next I'm taking this grass border die that came in the Borders die set, and I die cut a piece of this fun green, it's like a kiwi pattern paper, and then I added some kiwi ink to the edges of that grass. And that grass is going to go at the bottom of this mountain. So just adding some glue here to the bottom of the border, adding it to the bottom of the mountain, and it is extending off the sides, and I'm trying to make the even flat. Now if your piece that you die cut happens to have a rough edge, not a flat edge, you can just trim off the excess. You can just have it hang over the bottom just a little bit and then just trim off the excess on the bottom to make it a flat edge. Next I want to bring in a marshmallow, and I have the hot chocolate to stamp set from the Stamps of Life. So I'm going to stamp out a marshmallow in the chocolate ink just right onto that powdered sugar cardstock. I always like to just stamp it twice in case I get a better impression the second time. And I'm going to just trim this out, so just fussy cutting around it. It does have a die to match, but I didn't want to use the die because the die cuts the marshmallow in two separate layers, and I wanted one complete stamped image here. And to make the marshmallow look like it was toasted, I just took some ginger snap ink and just put some ginger snap ink around all of the edges of that marshmallow. Now this die set, it also comes with a die to cut a twig, which is what you see here, and I die cut it in the ginger snap. I had initially die cut it in the chocolate cardstock, you see that there on the table, but I realized that you wouldn't be able to see that with the chocolate background. So I did die cut it with the ginger snap cardstock and put some ginger snap ink around the edges of it, and now I'm just gluing these little pieces down. I'm going to use that twig to put the marshmallow on the end, so it will look like that little squirrel is roasting his marshmallow in the fire. So now I'm just adding glue to the back of the fire pit and adding that to the card, and the marshmallow as well as the twig. Now if you were to die cut that little squirrel, you would be able to have his hands open and you can actually put the twig inside. But I did not die cut him, I just used the shadow layer to die cut it out. So here I did have to trim off the bottom of the twig just to make that twig a little bit shorter. And then I'm just going to add glue to the marshmallow and add that to the top of that little branch there. Now with the mousse, because the coloring shows on the opposite side of that white image there, I put some glue on the back and attached it to a die cut piece of the shadow layer cut in the chocolate cardstock, because I knew I was going to have this mousse peeking out of the mountains, and I wanted the back of that card to be solid brown. I didn't want to be able to see the ink coming through the back of that cardstock. So you can see when that's turned over, it's solid brown. So now I'm just adding some adhesive to hold that mousse in place, and I'm ready to create my card base. So I took a piece of chocolate cardstock, folded it in half, and I'm taking the large mountain shadow die and I'm putting it there on my cardstock, making sure that the fold in the cardstock is to the right of the die, because I don't want to die cut through the cardstock. I want to actually have a little piece of the die extending beyond that cardstock fold so that I can create my folded card, which is my card base. So this piece that I decorated will adhere nicely to the top of my mountain card base. So I'm just going to open that card base up so it's laying flat on my table, and then I'm going to take my glue and put glue on the back side of the decorative piece. And I'm only going to put glue where the mountains are. So when you're doing this, make sure you're not putting any glue over top of the mousse where it extends beyond the mountain. Here I'm just adding some glue to the front of the mousse to make sure that his belly lies flat against those mountain tops. So now I'm just adding the glue. You see me just putting the glue on only the mountain part. And here when I get to the mousse, it's only going on again where the mountain is, because I don't want glue extending beyond the head of the mousse or the antlers, because that part is not going to be on a card base. And because the inside is such a dark cardstock, I do take a stitched rectangle die and die cut a piece of the white cardstock and add that to the inside. This way I can write my message on the inside, and I want you to notice that I did add a sentiment in chocolate ink to the top of the middle mountaintop. So that completes this card. For my next card, I'm going to be making a Z-fold card using the Z-fold card die set from the Stamps of Life, and I'm so excited to use this. I have not used this before. This will be my first time, and look at all the fun pieces that this die set comes with. It not only comes with the card base, but it also has some layering pieces if you wanted to include a gift card holder or even a tag holder. There's those dies, and there's also some fun flower dies and some sentiments. We're not going to be using all of those dies with this card today. We are going to be using that largest die in the set to die cut a piece of guava cardstock for our card base. I'm also using the layering dies and die cutting a piece of the snowflake paper that came from the Woohoo paper pad. I actually had to use 3 sheets of the pattern paper because those dies were so large, and I couldn't fit 2 dies per piece of paper. And I also want to point out that I am working on this card one side at a time. So right now, those pieces of snowflake paper, those are just for one side of the card. You will see as we progress into this card that when I get to the second side, we'll be using those dies to die cut paper for the second side of the card as well. So again, we're just working on one side right now, and I am using the mountain dies that came with the stamp dies, so these are the smaller mountain dies, and I die cut them out of the storm cardstock for the shadow layer and the cloud cardstock for the top layer, and then the powdered sugar for the snowy mountain tops. And I did add the cloud ink to the edges of the cloud cardstock, and I am going to do this 3 times. So I'm going to have 3 sets of mountains, one for each one of the panels in my Z-fold card, and again that's just for one of the sides of my Z-fold card. So the panel that I'm starting with is the largest rectangular snowflake panel die cut that you see there on the mat. And I'm using that, and I am taking my mountain die cuts and I'm putting it as close to the top edge as I can on that rectangle die cut. And then I'm going to snip off the edges because it does extend off the sides of that panel. And I'm going to die cut 2 stitched hillside borders using the border die that you see there for this panel. So I want to make sure that when I add my die cut that it does cover up the rest of that paper. So the border is actually going to be placed on top of the bottom part of that mountain because I don't want to have any of the snowflake paper peeking through the bottom of that mountain. And notice that I did die cut a larger piece of that border. So make sure you have quite a bit of cardstock there at the bottom of your stitched border die when you run it through the die cut machine. And then I'm just trimming off the excess that extends all around that panel. And then I'm going to take my second border die and layer that directly on top. So it's going to be like I have two sets of little snowy hills in this little section on my card. And I'm going to add that to the bottom and then just cut off the excess on each side. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other two panels. So again, I have my second set of mountains, which I've already die cut, and here I'm just putting it together. So I'm not going to show you all of the gluing just because you've seen this before in the previous cards. So I'm going to skip that part, and after that mountain's all put together, I'm going to add glue to the back of it, and I'm taking my third largest panel, snowflake panel, and I'm adding that mountain right there so that it's positioned as high as it possibly can go on that panel, and I'm cutting off the excess on each side. So you can see here how this Z-fold card is going to be coming along. I'm going to go ahead and glue down my largest panel that I did previously. And then I'm going to take this panel that I'm working on now, and I'm just placing it there in the middle because I want to make sure that when I add my snowy hill that the stitching is even. So I kind of want to make sure that it flows from one panel to the next. So that's why I went ahead and glued down that first panel. And now I'm going to go ahead and glue down the second panel, same way, just making sure that that snowy hill is over top of the mountain, and then just cut off the excess. Now it doesn't need to extend all the way to the bottom because I am going to be adding another snowy hill to cover that part up. And again, I want to make sure that that stitching extends from one panel to the next. So I want to make sure that it is even. So I just laid it there just to make sure that it would be matched up. And then I just adhere that to the panel and then trim off the excess. I love making these little scenes, and I thought this Z-fold card would be perfect to make a fun little snow scene with various stamped images. And you will see that I bring in various other stamps with this card, not just the Moose Mountain stamps, but also some other fun little stamp sets as well. So I'm attaching that panel to the middle, and now I'm working on the smaller panel, and here I am going ahead and adding my mountain tops, again making sure it's at the top, highest top of that panel, cutting off the excess. And on this panel I'm only using one snowy border because it's so little, and again I want to make sure that that stitching flows from one panel to the next. So I'm adding some glue to the back, adding that to my panel, and then I will trim off the excess. And then once those extra cardstock pieces are cut off, I will add glue to the back of that panel and add it to that smaller section on my Z-fold card base. And I just love the look of these mountains flowing from one panel to the next on this Z-fold card. So now I'm going to be putting my card together. I'm kind of just laying everything out where I want it to go. I'm not showing any coloring in this video. I have shown in this video and previous videos coloring of these stamped images that I'm going to be using. So these Christmas trees are from the Snow Globe 2 stamp set. I did color them up with my Copic markers. Again, I am using the Moose Mountain stamp, so you see the moose there. I colored this guy up just like I did in the previous card, as well as the fireplace and that little log and the squirrel. So a lot of the same coloring that you've seen previously. I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 Christmas trees on this side, but I'm also going to be bringing in some more Christmas trees on the other side, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I figured this card needs to be taken one side at a time. I am bringing the penguins in from the Wattle Penguins to stamp set, and that's where I got the small penguins. I will also be using the penguins to stamp set, and I'm going to be bringing in another penguin, and I'm going to be using that on the reverse side. So again, I went ahead and colored all these images up, and now I'm just adhering everything to where I want them to go. And you can see that each section will have its own cute little scene, but really the Z-fold card, it's actually one big scene, even though they are in separate panels. So I have the moose and the fireplace there in the largest panel. I have all of my little Christmas trees. Notice that the Christmas trees are tucked inside of that snowy hill. And when you're adhering your snowy hill, and I should have mentioned this earlier, make sure you're not putting glue at the very top of that stitching, because you want to make sure you have room there to insert those Christmas trees just like I have done. And here I'm just adding the log, and I'm going to add the little squirrel on top. I wanted to add a little marshmallow in his hand, but I didn't do it here because I have the squirrel separated by, separated in a different panel than the fireplace. And once this card is folded, it would kind of smush the little twig stick and the marshmallow when it's folded. So I didn't include it. I chose to omit it. Now, if you're recreating this card and you wanted to put it all in one panel so that you can do that, go ahead and do that. But I do think that little marshmallow that I did in the previous card just adds an extra special touch. I am bringing in the hat from the penguin set, and I did color that up with my Copic markers, adding it there to the little penguin. I will also be adding one to the moose as well. Now I'm ready to decorate the back of this Z-fold card. Now I want to point out that these layering dies, you actually have to die cut the reverse of the paper that you want in order for these panels to fit correctly on the back side of this card. So you can see I'm die cutting this middle panel face down with the die on the polka dot side of that paper, and then when I take it out of the die cut machine, I'm going to flip the paper over and it's going to give me that snowflake paper. And I did not have enough of the white with the pink snowflake paper, so I had to bring in the pink with the white snowflake paper. So see here how I had to turn over the snowflake paper and put my die face down on the penguin side, and when that comes out of the die cut machine, I just flip it over and have the snowflake paper showing front. So I hope that makes sense. So I'm not including any mountain dies on the back side of this Z-fold card, but I am going to include some of the snow hillside borders. So here I have a hillside border on the shortest panel, and I am also going to include a hillside border on the middle panel. So before I add that one to the middle panel, I'm going to go ahead and adhere the shortest panel down to the actual card base, because I want to make sure that my stitching on my hillside snowy border lines up with the one on the first panel. So adding that there to the middle panel, and then just trimming off the excess cardstock. I'm also going to add one more snowy hillside border to the bottom of this panel, because I want to make it look like my snowman is in the snow. That snowman is from the Snow Globe to Stamp set, which is the club set for the month of October. When you're adding your snowy hill, that bottom one, make sure you don't add glue all the way to the top edge so that the snowman has room to fit inside. That largest panel is going to be adhered directly to the cardstock with no snowy border, no mountains. It's just going to be a plain snowflake panel. And my intention was to have at least one panel where you can write a message, because after all, this is a card. So I go ahead and glue down my snowman. I am also bringing in the reindeer, and the reindeer is from the Extras for Snow Globe stamp set. And I'm adding a couple more Christmas trees to this side of my Z-fold card. Bringing in another penguin. Again, the penguin is from the Wattle Penguins to Stamp set, and putting him there in the snow. And then the larger penguin is from the Penguins to Stamp set. And I'm adding him there to the largest panel and adding a scarf around his neck. I die cut the sentiment Warm Wishes, and the Warm Wishes sentiment was part of the Christmas sentiments on HSN from the Stamps of Life, and I die cut that out of the guava cardstock, which is the same color cardstock as the card base. I did put double-sided adhesive on the back, make it easier to stick to my card, and I'm adding that there to my small panel. And I'm going to bring in another small Christmas tree to put there next to the penguin. And then I'm going to use the small banner that came with the Penguins to Stamp set. I went ahead and stamped the word joy inside of the banner. That's part of that stamp set as well. And I die cut the banner with the same guava cardstock and powdered sugar cardstock that I used in my card. And I'm going to add that banner to the top of the large panel. So again, this panel can be used just to write your message. And that completes this card. I just love how this turned out. All of these fun little winter scenes. And again, this is the Z-fold card from the Stamps of Life. So once again, here are all the cards that I created with this class kit, and I will link down in the description box below a link to the class kit information where you'll be able to find the date, the time, and all of the fun information for this class. I will also provide links to all of the additional products that I used on my cards in case you are interested in any of those. And thanks so much for watching. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.